Tonight we have a special guest who you may remember from our M10R launch. Russell Shakespeare is going to be sharing with us his experience as a portrait photographer, not only in terms of traditional portraiture of a single person, but also portraiture in the way it's done for magazines, because a lot of his work has been done for pretty high-end magazines over the years, and you will have seen a lot of his work, no doubt. So he's going to share with us not only some anecdotes and some stories, because there's some really good ones, but also some of the techniques he uses. So Russell, would you like to join us? Turn on your video and audio, and there he is.
Hello, Nick.
Hi,
hello,
how are
everybody
you?
else.
Good to see you again.
Yeah.
What's it like down at Currumbin at the moment?
Well, I've actually got a little jumper here because I'm down in my bunker office, and yeah, it's quite cool, but nice. Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Now you've got a fairly extensive array of images to show us this evening, and we were having a talk about it earlier. And there's some really good material, also material which will make a point about how you can actually achieve these sorts of portraits. Because I think portraiture, in my opinion, it's one of the most challenging things to photograph, because you're having to deal with people all the time, and there's a whole thing beyond just the technical aspects of getting a sharp picture, and that's managing the situation and so on. And hopefully you'll share a few ideas about that with us. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get you to start, I think.
Sure.
If you just want to share that first slide that you've got.
So and, I will share the screen, and you let me know if it's all good.
Double check.
Share.
There we go. That's the way. Okay, we're good to go. So go. Take it away, Russell.
Okay. Well, look, thank you everybody for, I won't say coming out tonight, but staying in and joining me. So look, just a little bit about my background. Some of you may know it, some of you may not, but I've been a magazine photographer for 27 years, but taking photographs for 33 years. And what I'm going to share with you tonight is, as Nick said, a lot of different stories and experiences, and what I'd like to do is just run through the photos. I've tried to get tear sheets of how things were published. I've succeeded in quite a lot, but you know, we're talking over a fair bit of time, so I've just got what I can. So look, I'm just going to get straight into it. I thought I'd start with this quote that sort of changed. Well, did it change my life as a photographer? Pretty much. I was always a purist. I studied Eugene Smith at art college, and I've just got his little massive biography, which I hope everyone can see. Very fat. But I learnt that even the gods have clay feet. And this quote, I love it. Available light is any damn light that is available. And for me, this was a huge reality check, because, you know, I was used to working in managing my day in perfect light. And then, you know, when you're a magazine photographer, there's no such thing as perfect light. You're sent out on assignment. You've just got to come back with a result. So I've followed Eugene's quote. My preference is to work in available light, but if it's no good, I always have a light there. So I thought I'd start off with a image of the artist Hazel Dooney, who was living and working down at Palm Beach in New South Wales. So I was sent down to photograph her. It was a 2-day assignment, and so I was photographing her in her studio, doing all that sort of reportage, documentary, and then we arranged the next day to meet up in better light. So we did all these pictures down by the water and using strobe lights in some instances. And then just as we'd finished the shoot, we'd come back out through this little walkway, which you can't see because it's at her feet. But we're actually on the main road, and I'm packing the gear in the car. I'm going, see you, Hayes. Thanks for the shoot. And then suddenly I went back into photography and I went, oh my goodness, that light. Like, it's absolutely incredible. And what was happening was the building, because we're actually on a very busy road, the building across the road was a white building, and it was bouncing this light back into it. And I said, Hazel, look, do you mind if I just take a couple more pictures? And she could see it in my face. You know, I was in that zone, and artists sort of understand each other, and she went, sure. So I did it. That was the shot they ran. Now, as a photographer, you sort of have to do every job that comes along your way. And this particular job was, now a lot of our people who are listening tonight, I'm assuming you're probably from Australia, but you could be all across the world. So a number of years ago, we had a Aboriginal man was killed or died in police custody on a little place called Palm Island, which is off the coast of Australia. Now, the magazine I was working for at the time, it was a very big issue here in Queensland and in the country, in fact. They sent us over there a year later to just do a story on the place and see, you know, how they were coping with everything that had happened. And I should point out that we were welcomed there completely to do this story. For this particular assignment, I judged my gear by what assignment I'm going on. So I knew this was going to be a fairly more documentary than studio stuff. So I took no lighting, just a very minimal kit, a couple of lenses and a couple of cameras. So this is actually a portrait of Cameron Doomadgee's widow, Tracy Twaddle. And it's one of those things that it's very difficult approaching someone, but she wanted to tell her story and she invited us in. And before we sat down, I said to Tracy, I said, look, are you okay if I photograph you through the interview so we don't have to do anything set up? And she said, sure. And of course, you know, it was a really emotional interview, really hard to take the picture, but, you know, it was a very powerful one at the time, or still is. Now, this was a really interesting assignment. This is Renzo Piano, who's a very famous architect, one of the top 5 in the world at the time. He was doing a building in Sydney, and I think it was Lend-Lease, but I can't be sure. Whoever commissioned him to the building invited on the particular magazine I was on at the time, a writer and photographer to fly to Genoa in Italy via Paris and do a series of portraits on Renzo Piano to go with the opening of the building. So it was like, you know, dream assignment, absolute dream. This is film days, no digital. I was using medium format, 6x7 cameras. So anyone who doesn't know, I think it's been so long since I've used one, 12 shots you get per roll. Anyway, we were there for 2 weeks. 10. 10. Nick's giving me the hands. 10. It's 10. Sorry, everybody. That's how long it's been. Anyway, yeah, so we went over. Renzo was having a exhibition at the Pompidou Centre, which he did the big redesign for. And so we went over, we met Renzo very briefly in Paris, had a look at his big retrospective, and then we went to Genoa and did a number of other things, like the sculptor who's creating all these amazing marble pieces that go with the building. Anyway, as we're going to meet Renzo on this day for the portrait shoot, the driver, who was the guy from the building company. He turns around and looks at me and he goes, in all seriousness, he said, I hope he's got time for the pictures. I just looked at him and went, are you serious? Like, you've flown us 14 days to this other country. We don't even know if we've got time for the pictures. So anyway, this particular lift goes up to Renzo's property, and it's a studio where they have all students. So we had to go up the lift through the landscape to get to his thing. So anyway, I decided I wanted to do a portrait there, and amongst a few other portraits, but obviously time was the issue. So for this one, I actually had my stopwatch, I set it, and from start to finish, it was under 19 minutes to get the picture. And that's like completely three different shoots, like in his studios, all that. So yeah, but probably one of the most stressful shoots I've ever had to do. For that reason, you had to change film, all that stuff, and 10 shots a roll, so every shot counts. So this was a particular assignment I did for Australian Geographic, and I was out, they sent me to a shearing station in South Australia that was celebrating their 150th anniversary. And it was really kind of strange because there was no brief other than just to document what was going on. So, I mean, that's a dream job, but it's also a little bit of a nightmare because, you know, you don't know what the expectations are, etc. So I sort of covered a lot of stuff that was going on. And then I found this shearer called, I've just got some notes here, Johnny Bruce, who was 88 years old, and he'd actually grown up shearing the sheep on this property. So I thought, yeah, I've got to do a portrait of this man. So we went into the shearing shed, and as soon as he got in the shed, it was like, yeah, this is where I'm meant to be. And for those who haven't been in shearing sheds, they're often quite dark, but at either end or in various places, there's a window. So I just said to Johnny, I didn't take any lighting. I said, could we just go over to that section of the shed, bit of window light, you just go back to your sheep days. And, you know, and he just reached out and he lovingly just was caressing the sheep. And that was the picture, and it ran like that, but no tear sheet, sorry. Now, I've sort of ummed and ahed about putting this shot in because there's nothing amazing about it, except that for the particular brief, this was a really obscure surfing magazine. And they said to me, they said, Russell, we want you to photograph this guy, Darren Handley, who's like this incredible legendary surfboard shaper. He's shaped boards for like all the world champions from the Gold Coast. And they said, mate, we want you to photograph him, but we don't want to see his face. We don't even want to see his hands, you know, his hands that shape all the boards. And I'm sort of going in my brain and going, I've never had a brief like this in my life. And they go, you know, just do his eye or do his mouth or his nose. So I'm going, oh, well, okay. And of course, I did do portraits because even Darren was looking at me going, mate, are you serious? They just want my mouth or my nose? Well, you know, that's what I was told. So anyway, luckily enough, I found a tear sheet and they actually went tighter and that's how it ran. So, you know, I don't necessarily think it's a great technical shot, but I love it because they went completely outside the box. And, you know, it was really refreshing to do a shoot like that. Now, when I was testing the M10R, I was really fortunate that Nick came out on a couple of the locations and did some background shots. So this particular guy is an artist called Christopher Trotter, and he works in steel and, you know, very amazing, unusual pieces. But so he was one of two artists that I wanted to photograph for the Leica project, and the second one we'll see in the the second chapter of this. I just wanted to show this really because I know this is a Leica thing and all that, but I just wanted to say that, you know, cameras for me, they've very much always been a tool. And I love them completely. They're my best friends. A lot of them have been longer with me than my whole family. So, you know, I have a big attachment to them. But, you know, if they're going to come with me, they've got to go the whole way. I'm not going to keep them safe. So here's a couple of shots from that particular shoot. I really wanted to do a portrait of Chris. And, you know, we were doing stuff in the studio. We did stuff outside. But it was, to me, it was all just a little bit boring, or a bit more, you know, I wanted to find something that was a little bit special. So anyway, later that morning, I noticed when Chris would walk past, getting a tool or something like that, this is another one of his amazing structures, he was in shadow, and I just saw his profile and went, that's the portrait. So I took a quick frame and I showed it to him and said, mate, this is the portrait I want to do. Are you okay with that? Like, I'm not going to really show your face, but it's you. And he looked at it and he went, I love it. So we did that for the next 5 minutes. I just got him to walk back and forth. But the interesting thing is, it was the first frame that was the real one, and that we loved, and it was honest, and it didn't look like a setup or anything like that. So yeah, a portrait doesn't always need to show the face. Okay, look, I thought I'd put this one in. This was a assignment that I was sent to do on a young boy who was 15 at the time. His name was Lachlan Miles, and we were doing a story on medicinal cannabis that was at the time, it was 2015, so 5 years ago, early days. Now, Lachlan had these life-threatening seizures, and sometimes he could have 2 or 3 a day or not have anything for a week. But whenever he had them, it was really touch and go. So the magazine sent me up there. He was having a good week, and they said, look, now's the time to do his portrait. And we'd aligned a day, all that sort of stuff. So I got up there, studio lights, everything. Just as I'm pulling into his street, I see this ambulance coming. So I immediately pull over and let it go past me. And then I keep driving. Anyway, it turns into the driveway of the house that I'm going to do this series of portraits. And so I'm just going, what is going on here? Anyway, I got there. As I arrived, the ambulance guys were opening the doors. His mother was on the street. She saw me. We did a quick, she said, I know you're Russell. Can you grab your camera? We need to document this, because no one understands what we actually go through. So suddenly it went from, you know, I'm not going to say the lazy photographer getting his gear out of the bag, studio, you know, 2 trips to the car. It was like, okay, grab your camera, forget all the rest. This is about doing real pictures, no setups, just documenting it. So, you know, when you're faced with all that, I mean, luckily my background is a press photographer. So, you know, the camera was ready. The cards were there, completely clean, clear. I was ready to go. It was just a matter of putting the lens on and off we went. The other thing I thought I'd just say about this one, which may not seem like anything to anyone other than someone who works in the industry, but for the first time in the history of the magazine, they put my byline on the front cover. Normally it's always the writer's byline, but not that, you know, who cares, but I noticed it because it's never happened ever. So I think that's my last one on the available light. And now we're going to go into strobe lighting. So I don't know my audience out there, but strobe lighting is when you bring an artificial light into the set. And it could be the flash on top of your camera, or it could be a studio light that is, you know, you're using off to the side or whatever. But I guess it's introducing artificial light to the scene. So just to continue on, 2 weeks later, we went to do the official portrait. So I'll just explain it first. So I've got my studio light, which is actually battery powered, and it's off to the right hand side of the camera where they've done that little burning in. And so I've got a light there just coming in, balancing with the subject to try and match the available light, but just to fill in things. And it's important to note that that bag that Lachlan has, that's his survival bag. So he has to take that wherever he goes. So it was important to include that in the picture. And anyway, at this stage, he's still all okay. Now, this was quite an interesting, it's not an amazing portrait, but it's a really quite funny story that goes with it. I was commissioned to go and photograph Doc Neeson, who was the lead frontman for a band called The Angels. If anyone doesn't know them, just YouTube them. You'll get all you need. It'll come up straight away. Anyway, so this was at a hotel in Brisbane. It was to go with a Q&A section in the magazine where they answer 20 questions about their life, what they eat, what was their favourite movie, book, whatever. Anyway, I turned up at the hotel and introduced myself to Doc, and he's looking at me, and I could see he had his glasses up at that stage. He's looking at me with a disappointment in his eyes, and I'm just going, "Oh, what's going on?" And he goes, "I was actually expecting a female photographer." And I said, "Oh, mate, I'm so sorry to disappoint you, but we don't have any female photographers on this magazine. It's just another bloke besides myself. So anyway, here I am." He said, "Oh, okay, well, that's all right." And so we went into the room. Now, on the technical side, this is a studio light. I've got a 1 metre square softbox off to that side. It's a really simple light, but in the magazine you don't have much time, so keep it simple. Anyway, I'm about to do the portrait. I go, "Doc, are you okay if we do one without your glasses?" And I won't say it how he said it. He said, "No, I'm not taking my glasses off." And I said, "No, well, that's all right. No worries." So we're still about to set up, and I'm just adjusting the light, doing a few tests. And I go, "Oh, how did you go with the questionnaire?" Because he's not giving me much, and I'm just trying to talk to him. And he goes, "Oh, that thing? No, I'm not answering any questions." And I go, "Well, are you okay to do the photo? Because they're not going to run the story." He said, "Yeah, let's do the photo." So anyway, we did the photo. Never saw the light of day. Just another day on what it's like working for a magazine. Now, anyone in Queensland, maybe Australia, will know this is Campbell Newman, who was our premier a number of years ago. This is pre-becoming premier. We were invited to do a road trip with him for 2 days on the campaign trail. So doing a road trip, for those who haven't worked in the media, you might think you have lots of opportunities to set up great pictures, all that sort of stuff. But no, the reality is you have like a minute here and there, wherever you can do it. Mostly it's stand-ups where they're talking to the local media, nothing like a one-on-one portrait. Anyway, Campbell knew that if he wanted to get a cover, he'd at least have to give us 5 minutes. So we agreed that on our journey of hundreds of kilometres around the state, if we found a suitable location, I would ring their car and they'd stop and we'd do it. So, yeah, thankfully, we found this spot that I knew would work well with the cover. And this is another thing as a magazine photographer, you're always thinking about the backgrounds because, you know, in the perfect world, your photo stands alone. But in the magazine world, you're going to get text in all the wrong places. So you've got to think about that. So normally, maybe my picture of Campbell would be a bit tighter, but I know they need text. So if I'm thinking like a 50 mil, well, put it on a 28 and you'll allow them extra space to do what they want. So once again, really simple setup. This was the same meter square softbox, one light, battery pack, etc.
Russell, can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
One thing I know people struggle with is how you balance the exposure of the strobe with the available light exposure, because there's a real knack in that. Maybe you could just say a few words about that.
Look, it's probably better if I actually explain that one, because I have actually got a slide coming up.
Perfect.
And you actually took the picture of me doing a light reading.
All right.
So I'll probably get onto that, spend a bit more time on that one when we get to it.
All right. Well, whilst I've got you, there is a question just popped up on my screen, which is, are we shooting with a DSLR in this magazine series, or were you shooting with the M rangefinders?
Yes, this is DSLR. And I should point out, not for all of these shots, but certainly the magazine shots, I was a staff photographer. So, yeah, I was supplied with the camera equipment and I just had to use whatever I was given.
Okay.
Yeah. But you will see shots with the M10. Yeah, definitely. So a year later, we had to do a follow-up story on Campbell Newman, like a little bit of a report card. So this, again, was a documentary approach with no studio lighting, etc. And as soon as I arrived in his office, it was like immediately I went, that's a double-page spread right there. And because I wasn't so much looking, I mean, I liked what was going on with Campbell in his office and all his reports. He's got to look at his little apple in the bowl and the looks like a muffin wrapped in plastic. And the secretary, who you can only see her eyes, like I love that. But then I was looking at the double-page spread in my brain going, okay, the middle, perfect spot for the gutter. That side is perfect because it's a blank blue wall. They can put text on under the desk. Like I read it so clearly, and it was obvious, like they ran it. That was the picture completely.
Hugh Hamilton would like to know, are you briefed on the possible layout and use of text, or are you just using your sort of rapport, if you like, with the editorial crew so that you knew how it could be used?
Yeah, look, rarely briefed. There are certain assignments where you will get a brief, but on this sort of thing, it's pretty much just fly on the wall type stuff. Yeah. If it's a particular cover and they know it's a cover, that's a different beast altogether. But all the stuff on the fly, they're always hoping you'll get a cover, but there's no guarantee. So when they do their little meeting every week, they'll go, okay, this could be a cover, but we don't know what we're going to get. Whereas if they go, okay, let's shoot this in the studio, then you'll be presented with a list of tear sheets from other magazines or drawings or whatever. And in a lot of cases, you'll have the art director, if not the editor as well there, just directing that shoot. Yeah. So each one is a little bit different. Okay, so this was an assignment I did on a boxer called Paul Briggs. And I can't remember if he was training up for a fight or whatever it was, but I was sent down to this gym to do a series of portraits of him, as well as documenting him in the gym, you know, sparring, all that sort of stuff. But for the main opener, they didn't want anything to do with the gym, just a straight portrait. So I turned up. Now, this is the middle of the day. The gym is just too busy in terms of doing a one-on-one portrait. So I noticed on the outside was this black charcoal wall, but it was the middle of the day. And I'm just thinking, what am I going to do here? Anyway, I had this idea that possibly I could turn the softbox on an angle, put him up against the wall, keep him in the shade of the softbox so you can see around the sides, it's like a half a stop brighter. And then that's the softbox, the triangle there. And I got him in that position, did the portrait, and thought, yeah, I think that's turned it from a really dull shot to at least give it a little bit of shape, a little bit of interest. And that's how they ran it. So, you know, each magazine is really different in its shape. So what I see through the camera often gets cropped into maybe not a square, but you tend to lose a bit of the top and a bit of the bottom. But yeah, it was interesting when you look at that. It's pretty much how I saw it, except, you know, we've lost the top. And obviously, you know, this is printed and the colour balance is a little bit different, etc. Now, this particular person was a singer-songwriter, Ben Salter. And we photographed, I met him at a club in the Valley. And I should point out too, I don't know if I've mentioned it, but 99.9% of my life, I'm working on my own. So I have no one there, except we're in the studio or the art director comes along. But yeah, literally 99.9% completely on my own. And this is sort of, it's one of my favourite shots, but one of my big stuff-ups too. And so we got there, I set Ben up, we did a series of portraits where he's looking at the camera. And then I just said, mate, you just sit up at the bar, just do whatever you want. And I'm so focused on the subject that I wasn't looking to the window, and there's my softbox in the window. And some of you may not have even noticed that, but and I certainly didn't notice it at the time, but when I got back and I looked at it, I went, the softbox, you know. So I sort of look at this shot as a little bit of a, you know, I like to beat myself up over it a bit because I go, I should be looking, I should be more aware. But, you know, these are the things, you're on your own. I'm thinking about the spread, I'm looking at his face, I'm looking at his hands, his feet, but I missed the softbox. But I just thought I'd say too, you know, the big thing is, as a magazine photographer, on every shoot I go, you're always hoping, or you're shooting for a cover, even if it's not a cover. But, you know, so many instances you come back and they go, that's a cover. So I shoot for a cover and a double page spread. And thankfully, you know, they ran it pretty true to how I shot it. Now, this particular person is a writer, and his name is, he's a Brisbane writer, Venero Amano. I hope I pronounced that properly. Now, we went out to his house. He was doing a book, or a book was being published, so we're out there to to do some portraits of him. And as we came up the driveway, it was a classic house, but what I noticed was the windows, and I loved the cracked paint and all that sort of stuff. So we did all these shots in around the house, and then I said, Venero, could I take a shot in that window? It's going to take a little bit of time because what I want to do is light you. So I've got a light inside, just to the right of him, inside the room. And this is in the days before we had a remote control that you could adjust the light like on the top of your camera, pretty much. So yeah, it took a lot of tweaking to get that right look. Me going from the outside, having to go inside, adjust the camera, adjust the flash, talk to him, tell him, mate, I just want you to go that way a little bit. I didn't want him positioned perfectly in that frame, but just cut off a little bit. Anyway, these days it's a lot easier because you have a trigger or a transmitter that I can adjust that from 20 meters away perfectly. Yeah. Okay, so I'm now going to introduce two lights to the equation. And I rarely do two lights because I don't have anyone to help me. But on this occasion, we had the art director who this was going to be a cover shoot. And it's Laurie Lawrence, for those who don't know, who is a swimming coach, coached many Olympic athletes, and a huge sort of louder than life motivational speaker. So I think, they wanted to do something a bit quirky, like, he doesn't stop talking, he could talk underwater or stuff like that. And I'm not quite sure now what the scuba mask was for, but anyway, it doesn't matter. The main thing was for this shoot, it was in a swimming pool, an inside swimming pool, not an outside one. And we had a few problems, like I'd photograph him in the water, and with refraction, anything under the water goes a bit sort of wobbly and crazy looking and doesn't look quite right. So thankfully I had the art director there with me. I gave her a kickboard, and she was at the side of the pool, just slowly moving the water, so it would just create a bit of a rippling effect and also hide the distortion that caused by refraction. So, and obviously I've got a light to the front of him and a light at the back, just to create all those highlights and the sparkles in the water. Anyway, that's how they ran it. So it was pretty true to how it was shot, just cropped a little bit. So I'm going to put this shot in because this is also, I'm not going to call it a failure, but after this it was a reshoot. I was sent out to do a story on this band, a Brisbane band that had sort of made it big in Europe, but in Australia, in their own hometown, they were completely, they had like a small following of diehard fans who followed them, but to the mainstream, they weren't very popular. Anyway, they were all living in this share house in a suburb in inner city Brisbane. I turned up, and it's not the end of the day, it's the middle of the day, and they're all sitting around drinking and smoking, and did the introduction. I said, look, guys, can you just not change anything? This is where I want to shoot it. Because the whole story about their time in Europe was basically what they're doing now. But it was a very dark room, and if you're used to working with, or not used to working with flash, to light that room, I'd have to be on this really wide open aperture to actually get any light coming in. So it was quite a tricky little lighting thing, because I I didn't want to lose the grunge of the room, but I wanted to get everybody sharp. So I've actually got two lights in this picture, and it's an old Queenslander. So this is the middle of a Queenslander. For those who don't know Queenslanders, it's often very pokey rooms that could be dark in the middle of the house, but on the outside is verandas. And in this case, a veranda on the right-hand side of the picture and a kitchen to the left. So I set two lights up there, a fair way away from this. And yeah, it was just a matter of taking 10 or 15 minutes to get that lighting right to show it. Anyway, I was so happy with the shot. I thought, this is it. I've captured the mood, everything. I did a number of other shots, but anyway, the magazine never saw the light of day. We ended up shooting them in the studio on a white wall, and they put a French flag behind that was their way of showing it. But on the good side, the band loved the shot, and it went in their next album that they did. Yeah.
A couple of questions there, Russell. Was that? And there's actually two questions about this, which I'll join together. Was this shot in monochrome, or are you just shooting in color raw and then doing the conversion later? Yeah.
Okay. So good question. It's not shot in monochrome. I shoot everything raw. And then I do the adjustment afterwards. And I should say also, at the end of a magazine shoot, I do an edit. At the end of the day, they get everything. It's part of the rule. Not so much as a freelancer, but being on staff, you basically have to hand over the whole lot, which is a bit, daunting. But I always do an edit, and then they all know deep down in my heart and soul, I'm a monochrome man. So they always know at the end of a shoot, whatever they get in black and white, they know that's my favourite picture. That's my little statement. I don't say anything, but they all know, oh, that's his favourite picture. Yeah. So, no, I shoot in raw completely and then adjust it afterwards. Yeah. I've been shooting raw for, 15, 20 years. Yeah. Okay. So I think we're going all right for time.
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Yeah. Okay. So look, this was and there's nothing amazing about this picture, and this isn't about this picture. It's the next picture. So a journalist, writer, and myself were commissioned to do a portrait of the Queensland governor at the time, Quinton Bryce. And we had an hour. So to my way of thinking, an hour means 30 minutes for the writer, 30 minutes for the photographer, but no. So anyway, we agreed, and we did this before we went out on the shoot. He could have 40 minutes and I could have 20, and that's okay. I thought, I can do it in 20. So the writer is in a little room just off to the side of the painting on the right. There's a doorway in there. So he's in there. I'm picking out a place to do a cover and an opener. And you can see, a double page spread and the cover. So to me, this seemed like the perfect spot for a double page spread, because you've got on the left-hand side where those stairs are, they could put text, a fold down the middle, and position the subject to the right. And then I had a place picked out for the cover. But so I was testing on the butler, the head assistant, and all these people are busy, but anyone who walked past, I'd just go, look, could I just get you to stand there for 1 minute and I'll do this test? So this is how it went. Anyway, so at the 40-minute mark, I'm ready. Lights set up. I've done all the tests. Gets to 45 minutes, nothing. 50 minutes, nothing. 55 minutes, they're laughing in the room. I can hear them laughing. The governor and the writer are laughing. And I'm going, I've only got 5 minutes. And the guy, her driver, has pulled up and he's waiting at the door. And I said, mate, I've got to do this portrait. Anyway, she came out 3 minutes before she had to hop in the car. So we did the shot in less than a minute. And thankfully, Quinton is the master. She knows how she looks, a bit like the Queen. She knows how to stand, all that stuff. We did it. I had the shot basically in the first frame, but I took a few more in case it was out of focus. As you can see, it worked beautifully. Text on the left-hand side, gutter down the middle there. I haven't got the cover, but anyway, it worked. But yeah, incredibly stressful, incredibly stressful. And I don't like working like that, but it happens a lot more times than you can imagine. So this was an assignment that, this is the writer, Colleen Mcculloch, who sadly has passed away since this photo was taken. Now, Colleen, really famous, reclusive Australian writer. She did her latest book. She never does media or tries to get out of it because, for a number of reasons. But this was her latest book, and the publishers were putting pressure on her to do it. Now, the magazine that I was working for, the company, they got the rights to do extracts out of the book, and it was going to be syndicated Australia-wide and to other publications around the world, obviously where her books were. Now, Colleen came back to our editors and said she's happy for the writer to come. And we had to travel to Norfolk Island, by the way, so it's not just down the road. So she's happy for the writer to come, but no photographer. They can use a supplied shot. Now, thankfully, the magazine actually stuck to their guns and said, look, we need to do a real portrait. If you're not going to have a photographer, the deal's off. So she had to relent. And thankfully she did. But she put conditions on it. She said, okay, but he's only got 10 minutes. So we fly to Norfolk Island. And when you fly to Norfolk Island, it's not just like you fly there and you fly back. You fly there and then you're there on the ground for 3 to 4 days. And then the next flight out is I think it's 3 or 4 days later. So I was thinking, oh, well, lots of time at the beach for me, lots of swimming. So anyway, the next day we went to visit Colleen, and once we sat there and talked to her, and she's in a chair too, like she can't walk. She's actually seated in a chair, but she went there from a wheelchair or a walker. And once again, actually, same writer who did the governor, he gets an hour and a half for the interview. And I'm just going, how does this happen? You know, the writer gets an hour and a half, I get 10 minutes. Anyway, at the end of this, she looked at me and she could see that we were actually, you know, going to do the right thing. And she looked at me almost with pleading in her eyes and said, look, what do you want to do about this photo? And I said, look, and part of me is going, this could be the last time, you know, like she could die overnight. I could die overnight. I should just take a shot. But I said, look, Colleen, I can see you're really tired. And she was. And I said, if you're okay, could we do it tomorrow as long as you wear the same outfit? And immediately her face, she just said, thank you. And all the time I'm just going from that time on till the next day, I'm going, geez, I hope I did the right thing, you know. And so I went back the next day. She was lovely. We had a great time. She was laughing. We ended up having beers with her. she took us into her inner sanctum, which no one has ever been into, where she actually writes her books. And, you know, and also too, as I was doing all these pictures, I was really aware that this, more than likely, and it was the last photo shoot she would ever do in her life. So, you know, it was a huge responsibility. So apart from all this stuff, I'm documenting all these little details. And, you know, she's a chronic smoker. So just to the right of her wheelie chair is all these cigarettes lined up in a box, beautifully lined up, you know, so she can go from one to the other. But anyway, at the end of all this, like, she gave me an hour and a half, and that's how it ran. That was the cover. That was the opener. And that was inside. So, you know, it was one of those jobs that potentially, you know, it was looking like the disaster job of the century, but still to this day, it's probably one of my favourite shoots. You know, it was a really special shoot, and yeah, amazing. So, yep, we're still okay for time.
Yep.
So look, I really wanted to... Yeah.
Sorry, Russell. There's a couple of questions just popped up whilst you're changing topics slightly. Tony would like to know how you optimize your workflow when editing. So when you've been to a shoot like that one of Colleen, and in fact, it might be very relevant to what you're about to talk about.
Exactly. Yeah, this is it.
Because it's possibly how you narrow it down to the shot. So
okay.
Good slide.
Okay. Good. Yeah. Good question. So I don't work in Lightroom, and it's not because I've got anything against Lightroom. It's just I haven't gone down that road. I always work in Bridge. Because I shoot raw for everything, I don't do presets. Most of my work, I've got to keep it pretty straight to how it was shot. So I tend to just always work in RAW and this is a classic example, except unlike Colleen, where I had an hour and a half, you know, we wouldn't be able to fit all Colleen's photos on the screen, but this was the shoot for Bob Catter. This was a 2-day shoot going through his electorate in Mount Isa. For 2 days, this is what we were told, condensed to 3 minutes in his office at Parliament House in Brisbane. So this is the complete shoot. So before I talk about the shoot, I'll actually answer that question. So when I finish a shoot, I bring all the shots up just like that, and I go through each one, and then I give them a rating. And you can see on some of them, there's a star at the bottom. So that's how I do my editing. And then I select all those star-rated ones. And then I start taking it to like 2 stars or 3 stars or whatever till I get to the one that I think is going to be, well, the one that I want to present as the cover option. And then, of course, you know, they'll get the rest. But this particular shoot, as I said, we were scheduled to go away to Mount Isa. This is a politician, Queensland politician, for anyone overseas. He's very famous for wearing his hat. In just about every picture, you'll see him with his hat. He's I guess a cowboy, or if you're American, or, you know, his electorate is rural. So once we found out, well, actually, I should say, when we found out we were doing Bob Catter, my immediate thought was I really want to do a portrait of him in his hat, but to darken his face. So, you know, it's a little bit more interesting, and it's sort of like, who is that man under that hat really? Because he's very public, bit of a showman, very controversial, but who is that man really? Anyway, once we found the shoot was another under 5 minute one. I did a test on his assistant, which is the first frame, and then did this series of portraits of Bob, immediately going back into conservative mode. And this is something that this sheet is really, really important. When I found we had 3 minutes, I sort of panicked and went, oh, geez, you know, I've got to throw that creative shot out the window and try and at least get something that they're going to publish. So I went conservative again, you know, instead of following your gut. So you can see I did all these shots of him without the hat, so they would have him without the hat, and then the series with the hat, so they'd have that option as well. And then, as you can see, about maybe a third of the way through, I suddenly remembered, oh, that shot you wanted to do. And so I did it, but I only took 3 frames. And I look at it now and go, what are you thinking? You know, like your focus could have been off or whatever, but it was, yeah. So this is another one that I sort of beat myself up about a little bit, because I didn't really stay with my original gut intention. But, you know, these are the things you face when suddenly the whole shoot goes out the window and it gets condensed to a couple of minutes. So anyway, that was the one of the 3 shots that I liked, and I did pitch it to them that this is the one, and thankfully they did it. They ran it. They kept it really clean. No other text on the cover other than the story and who was the writer. Okay, so now we're going on to, I think we're going pretty good for time.
We're doing very well, actually, Russell. Thank you.
Good. Okay. So, Michael Zavros, artist, and this is the artist that I actually did the M10R story with, which we'll see a couple of that tonight, but I think it's coming out fuller in a couple of weeks. Now, this is my first time I photographed Michael, which I think, 2009. And so that is 11 years ago. Now, this is a one light portrait, but what we did, it was Michael's idea. He wanted to be photographed with this bow tie in that particular shirt. So I said, great, let's do it. So I only had one light, and what we did, I've got the light to the side of him, which you can see that where it's a bit more blown out. And then we stuck one of his canvases on the other side of his face, because we wanted to make it pretty even lighting. So that was my first introduction to Michael, he's a painter, a sculptor, he draws, he also does photography, etc. So now, for anyone who wanted to know about the setup, this is it. I keep things really to a minimum, and because it is mostly on my own, it's one light. I have this umbrella with a big, it's like a softbox on the front of it, and I also have a square one, and that's about as complex as I get with the lights. Occasionally I might have 2, but I really try and keep it simple, like, you know, God's light shining through the window. There's only one sun. I try and keep it to one most of the time. So yeah, that's my setup. You can't really see the M10, but you can see on the top of it, I've got a little transmitter that's, is it radio slave or channels? Anyway, it communicates to the flash head. So I don't have sync cords or anything for that.
Actually, Russell, was in that pause, there was a question that popped up earlier, which I'm just going to scroll back
to. About the meter?
It was about synchronizing on the M.
Yes.
I'm just looking back for it, but it was saying he couldn't synchronize with the M. We had no problems at all with that.
No. Well, look, I don't know what he had it set on, but all of these were set on, there is like a red flash symbol, but I actually put it below the flash symbol to 125.
Actually, I've misread the question. The question was, my M camera can't handle fill flash. How do you cope with that? But I think we're sort of talking along those terms, because that's about the balance of the flash ready available, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. So, yeah, for that particular person, I'd have to see their picture or something, and then maybe I could, you know, they're free. Feel free to email me, anyone, whatever you like, you know.
David Bishop is the gentleman asking the question.
Okay, yeah. Look, I might just go to the next slide, because this will sort of answer the question that you talked about a while ago. So about how do I do an exposure. So what I do, I have a meter, a light meter, which I put in front of the subject. I set it to like a non-chord reading, so I can operate that meter from the radio transmitter. And so I take a flash reading, and that's usually my starting point. And then we look in the camera and see how we're going. So I usually try and adjust it. I use the flash as the flash meter as the starting point, and then I use the camera from that point on. And with the camera, without getting too technical, there is settings on there that has all the histograms, so you can see if things are going, you know, hugely, if you're losing detail or not. So I thought I would just show you this particular shoot. Because we were photographing Michael, I photographed him over a number of days. We were doing lots of different scenarios. It wasn't necessarily a magazine shoot, so I wasn't under that same pressure. But for this shoot that we were doing with his alter ego, this is part of a show that he was getting ready for, where he actually sculpted his own face and put it on a dummy which he would dress up like him and take it to the beach, and all very bizarre but amazing and fascinating. So anyway, that's my process there, I guess, of trying a number of different scenarios, always talking to the subject. I'm showing him the back of the camera so he knows what I'm seeing. And, you know, it's a wonderful way to work. So it's definitely a collaboration. And that was the final image that I liked. I mean, I still like all the others, but for me, that was the one. And yeah, that's the one that was on our thing for tonight. So I think I've just got one more to go, and I thought I'd leave it on this, because even though this isn't strobe light, but it's all about available light, strobe light, I just wanted to talk about this picture, because this is a picture I did not on assignment. My daughter at the time was just learning how to body surf, and she'd reached that point where she could suddenly catch a wave, and it was, you know, a great moment for her. And we live, you know, 10 minutes away from the beach, so the beach is a big part of my life. I have a water camera, so I would take the water camera out with me, shot on film, and we'd just go body surfing together, and I'd have the camera and I'd try and catch a wave with her. You know, it was just the love of hanging out with your family and love of photography. No greater reason other than that. At the time, I was freelancing, and one of my clients was Time magazine. They were doing a special feature on Australia, and they just asked all their different photographers around the country to submit a series of pictures on their home. Anyway, I thought, I'll send this, you know, like it's out of focus a little bit. Everything's a bit wrong, but I love it because it was that great moment. And anyway, that's how they ran it. So it was on the cover for their special issue. So I guess what I'm saying is, you know, there's God's light, no flash, nothing, but, you know, at the end of the day, we just want to get out there, take pictures, take them for yourself. Yeah. So that's it from me. I'm really happy for, I think we're right on the hour, Nick.
Absolutely brilliant.
Really happy for any questions, whatever you want to throw at me. I may or may not be able to answer it, but really happy to.
Okay. All right. Well, firstly, I'd like to say thank you so much, Russell, because that was really insightful, I thought. And there's actually, you changed a couple of pictures on me for the better, I hate.
I did.
The one of Michael with the bow tie I've not seen before. That
I got in trouble.
Yeah. So, okay, so we've got a couple of questions here. Michael Diab would like to know, this popped up when you were talking about Michael Zavros' shoot, so I'm hoping those are the images it's relevant to. But he says, do you prepare the scenarios or do you go by intuition and feel on the day?
Okay, look, I'm glad you asked that, because this is what Michael actually said. He said he has so many people who have this preconceived idea, but I don't. I don't at all. Occasionally I might, but I have this thing where I've had like 20 years of, well, not 20 years, but a number of years where you have all the people around the boardroom table who come up with these ideas, and I'm trying to go, look, guys, these are real people, you know, they can't just do everything you want. Like, we've got to be flexible. We've got to make it a bit organic. So yeah, my preferred approach is to be completely organic and let things happen. Now, as you can see with a number of those shoots, when you've only got a minute, then the organic goes out the window and it's like, what do I need to do to get a cover? So yeah, I guess, you know, in my brain, I've always got this backup plan, but it's always a backup. I like plan A to be meet them, try and work out, you know, in the space of a few minutes, normally, you know, you turn up to someone's house, you've never met them, they've never met you. I usually ask the subject, what would you like to do? You know, have you got a favourite place in the house or the garden or whatever, you know, and go from there.
Good stuff. I just thought you might like to know, we've actually got people watching from all over the world. We had a gentleman from Belgium say hello earlier, and somebody from Scotland. So there's a couple others I've scrolled off my list here. So yeah, so you're going out broadly, which is really, really good. I've had so many good comments come through. Oh, here we go. Russell, would you consider using the monochrome Leica at all?
Of course. Yes. No, as I said, I'm the monochrome man. Yeah, I love it. I mean, in fact, you know, when I do my own personal work, like with the digital Leica, I turn it to black and white. Just sort of like when you're shooting a digital negative and a JPEG, well, the JPEG's black and white, because that's my first thing of how I'm viewing it. Yeah.
If anybody if anyone's interested in that process and didn't see it, I did a webinar myself a few weeks ago on that version thing. So if you look on the YouTube channel, you'll see that there, and we talk about the shooting in black and white, but you get a color raw, but you get a black and white JPEG, which is a useful tool. So we got Deanne Flatley from Missouri is watching. Yes, somebody else from Canada enjoying their morning coffee, listening to you, which is really, really good. Has anybody else got any other specific questions before we wind things up? I'm just looking back to see if I've missed anything. Don't think so. I think we've got them all at this stage. Well, one thing that to make a little observation, and I think hopefully Russell will agree with me, is it's about getting the shot. It's also about being in full mastery of your gear, because imagine photographing Quentin Bryce in a minute. You need to be on top of your technique. So that practice comes into play a lot. So practice, because when the rubber hits the road, you don't want to be fiddling around with the dials and going, what do I do now? It's really important.
Right. Yeah, and look, especially too with that particular story with the boy with the medicinal cannabis, you know, that was a classic example where my brain all the way up, because I had to drive 2.5 hours to get to their house. And so all the way up, it's a big mountain range up in Toowoomba. So I'm thinking about this portrait that I'm going to do. How am I going to do this that shows this boy what he's going through? I'm just going, how do you show that? So my whole thing, 2 hours of it going through my brain from leaving home to get up there, and within 5 seconds, throw it out the window, you're here to go documentary. So, yeah, you've got to be prepared just to just go a completely different tack. Yeah.
Flexibility. Greetings from Lithuania here as well. There we go.
Right.
And question has popped up from, we have a regular attendee who, and I don't know who it is. It's the name is anonymous attendee.
Okay.
I have a few questions. One day I'm going to find out who you are. Do you do commissions for portraits?
Yes, I do. Yes, okay. I just did one for the National Portrait Gallery. Well, it was a year ago. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Okay, that answers that question. All right. Well, look, I think I'm going to wind it up there. If there's no more, hang on. There's one more comment coming up here. That can answer that one. Mark Deverage would like to know, what was the trigger that Russell uses with his M and his gear? And if you're referring, Mark, to the radio slave, it's, I think, Russell, you were using the Pro Photo one?
I've got it right here.
Okay. There it is. And that's the Pro Photo generic one, not
it is, yes,
brand,
because Pro Photo do a trigger. I think, look, they may do it for other cameras, but I know they certainly do a dedicated one for a Canon or a Nikon. They may do others, but then they have the generic one. And yes, that's what the M is shot with.
All right. So I'm just answering a quick question. Anonymous attendee would like to know how to get in touch. So I just said email or on the website, which is on your website, I believe.
Yes, yeah. And look, if anyone does have any questions, you know, you can get me through my website or Instagram. Very easy to find. Just send me a message. No problem.
Okay. All right. Well, look, Russell, thank you so much for spending your evening with us all. I know as I've known you, there's dozens and dozens of comments going, thank you so much. That was really interesting. Yeah. So you've gone down very well, which is fantastic. It's a lovely presentation.
No,
I'm going to let Russell go. And I'll just wind up. So if Russell, you want to say goodbye and disappear.
See you later, everybody. Thanks for viewing. I really appreciate it. And good night from me.